What if all the continents on Earth began moving toward each other? It sounds impossible, but Earth's continents are already moving today. They sit on enormous tectonic plates that slowly travel across the planet's surface. Usually these movements are so slow that humans cannot notice them. But imagine that this process continued for millions of years. Africa would move toward Europe. India would continue pushing into Asia. Australia would move northward. The Americas would gradually approach Europe and Africa. The oceans between the continents would slowly become smaller. At first, almost nothing would look different. But beneath the surface, Earth would already be preparing to build a completely new world. A new supercontinent would be forming. As the continents continue moving, the oceans between them would begin to shrink. The Atlantic Ocean would gradually become narrower. The Mediterranean could eventually disappear completely. New mountain ranges would begin forming where continental plates collided. These collisions would not happen gently. When two massive pieces of Earth's crust meet, neither one simply disappears. Rock would buckle, fold, and rise upward. Over millions of years, enormous mountain systems could emerge. The planet's map would slowly become unrecognizable. Seas would close, coastlines would move, and huge areas that were once underwater could become dry land. Earth would be entering another supercontinent cycle. After millions of years, the continents would finally become connected. Africa could join Europe. Asia would connect with Australia. The Americas could become part of the same enormous landmass. Eventually, most of Earth's land would form one gigantic supercontinent. The planet would still have a huge global ocean surrounding it, but the geography would be completely different. Imagine being able to travel across thousands of kilometers of land without crossing an ocean. Mountains would stretch across enormous distances. Rivers would have completely different paths. Coastlines would be pushed far away from many places. This new world would resemble the ancient supercontinent Pangaea, but it would not be exactly the same. Earth would have created an entirely new version of a supercontinent. But creating one giant continent would dramatically change Earth's climate. Today, oceans help distribute heat around the planet. A huge supercontinent would disrupt that system. The interior of the landmass could become extremely far from the moderating influence of the ocean. That means enormous temperature differences. Summers could become brutally hot in some inland regions. Winters could become extremely cold. And vast deserts could develop across the center of the continent. Coastal areas would have a completely different climate. Ocean currents would also have to find new paths around the supercontinent. Rainfall patterns would shift. Some regions could become wetter, others could become almost completely dry. Life would also have to adapt. Animals that once lived near coastlines could find themselves thousands of kilometers from the sea. Species adapted to separate continents would suddenly share the same enormous landmass. This would allow animals and plants to spread into regions they could never reach before. Some species could thrive, others could disappear. New predators and competitors would meet for the first time. Forests could expand in wetter regions. Deserts could dominate the interior. Migration routes would completely change. Over millions of years, evolution could produce new species adapted to this strange geography. The supercontinent would not just change the map, it would change the evolution of life itself. Now imagine humans living on this future Earth. The world map would be completely unrecognizable. Countries and borders would eventually become meaningless compared with the enormous geological changes. Cities that were once separated by oceans could eventually become connected by land. Trade routes would change completely. New roads and migration corridors could cross regions that are currently underwater. But living in the interior would be extremely difficult. Fresh water could become scarce. Temperatures could become extreme. Coastal regions might become the most valuable areas for human civilization. Humanity would have to adapt to a world with completely different geography and climate. And the strange part is that this wouldn't happen overnight. It would happen so slowly that generations would barely notice the continents moving. So what would Earth look like if all continents eventually merged? We would have one enormous supercontinent surrounded by a global ocean. Massive mountain ranges would divide different regions. The interior could be dominated by extreme deserts. Coastal areas would experience completely different climates. Ocean currents would follow entirely new paths. Plants and animals would migrate into new environments. Evolution would begin creating new ecosystems. Human civilization, if it survived long enough, would live on a world almost impossible for us to recognize today. But there is one important detail. Earth has done this before. Hundreds of millions of years ago, most of Earth's land was joined together in a supercontinent called Pangaea. And eventually, Pangaea broke apart. The continents we know today are simply one stage in a much larger geological cycle. So perhaps the most amazing thing isn't that the continents could unite again. It's that Earth is constantly rebuilding its surface. The map of our planet is never truly finished.